Yeah, hi, Neeraj. I'm just going to request everybody to be off video and just mute yourself as we start. And as we get on to the top of the hour, may I just request to put on the video, please?
So I'll walk you through my journey. It's actually an interesting picture. That's me. It was a few years apart. My parents haven't changed that much. I unfortunately have. My love affair with logic started a long time ago. I have always believed, literally right from the very beginning, in the value of an engineering education. I love the teamwork. I love the collaboration. I love the fact that it's a whole series of people working together with disparate backgrounds, diverse viewpoints, and building something together. It is about the collective, not the individual. Ideas are to a penny. The ability to reduce them to practice, to work as a team, to collaborate, to constantly move the ball forward, building with attribution on the work of others, is what really engineering was all about. I always found that fascinating. And that was a key element of what drove me. I was also influenced by my father. My father is an amazing man. He grew up dirt poor. He lost his father at an early age. He went through a rigorous series of education where he did it at night so he could support his family during the day. And over time ended up to be one of the most senior government officers in the country and an author of 10 different law books that are still quoted.
What I want to talk to you today about is the third wave of enterprise communication. I think arguably we live in the greatest time for enterprise communication. I think Alan talked about the fact how we are transitioning from essentially on-premise to cloud. Amazing group of companies are all jumping in because they're realizing communications is so critical. It is shifting essentially from being a utility to a critical functionality that will determine the success and failure of enterprises.
Vai ser, viu?
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in, Vikram. Thanks, everybody from the US. I know it's an early morning for you. Thanks for making time. Thank you for joining us from Europe. And of course, all my friends in India too. So wherever you are from, I can see people from the Middle East, etc. Great to have you. And thank you so much for making time, to join us today. Because we've got a very august guest today. And you might have seen him on the video, right? But we have him right here live. And I'm going to request Vikram to just kind of introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mudit. And it is a small world. Mudit and I went to high school together. I think that's right around the time dinosaurs roamed, back in, I think, early 80s. I think the last time I physically saw you was probably in the early 80s. And then we lost touch and just reconnected, I think, in the last few months. Anyway, a little bit about myself. I 3 degrees in electrical engineering, the first one from Florida Institute of Technology, then University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, and then Stanford. I left Stanford to help start a company, and this is, again, giving you a perspective, early days. We helped start a company to track cargo containers around the world. And it pretty much ended up becoming the global standard for every cargo container around the world. And so that was the first example, and actually is cited as the first example of the Internet of Things. I still maintain that I came up with the name Internet of Things in a bar, but Kevin Ashton took credit for it from MIT. But that's a conversation for a different day. But from there, we built the company up. It was 30 of us. We then sold it to Texas Instruments. I think 2 of us were the key owners, plus we had an angel investor, and we sold it to to Texas Instruments back in, I'm talking, mid to late 90s for $30+ million. A few years later, we found a way to buy the company back during a major upheaval in corporate America, where Texas Instruments, a portion of Texas Instruments' business was merging with Raytheon. We saw an opportunity. We were able to buy the company back for well under $10 million. We raised money from, I'm sure you've heard these people, Accel Partners, which is one of the top, I think they were the primary funder of Facebook. We raised money from Temasek, which is government of Singapore. We raised money from Hutchison Whampoa over in Hong Kong. We raised money from UPS. We raised money from Oracle. We raised a lot of money. And we turned around about 6 years later and sold the company to Lockheed Martin for well north of $400 million. I was then a president at Lockheed. My job at Lockheed was to commercialize technologies. And from there, I worked with the government of Singapore, actually, Nanyang Technological University, to commercialize nanomaterials. I worked with the government of UK to mine the ocean surface for seabed mining, polymetallic nodules. I worked with folks on the LiDAR technology. So that was a lot of fun at Lockheed. As I was getting ready to retire, I joined a few boards. I joined a board of a company called Ray Systems, which we helped turn around and sold to Honeywell. I also joined the board of a company called 8x8. 8x8 was a voice over internet protocol provider, primarily a chip company. And then we helped grow the business from about 100 million in revenue to about 550 million in revenue, from about 700 million in market capitalization to right around 2.3 billion in market capitalization, and from about 400-ish employees to about 1,700 employees. And then I exited December of 2020 from 8x8. And then I was approached on by a whole lot of different companies to join the boards. I joined the board of a company called Ping Identity, which was just recently sold for $2.8 billion to Thoma Bravo, that's in the cybersecurity space. And then I've joined a few cybersecurity, a few supply chain. There's also a very fascinating company that I've joined, which I want to plug for, which is called Genesis Digital, which does basically what we do is the ability to ensure that you can run your complete business from the time for customer acquisition to billing to support for any physical assets for a small business. So again, it's been fun mentoring people, working with people, helping people blossom and grow. So that's been the challenge and the fun of my life.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think a lot of people are, going to get bamboozled by all the numbers that you threw at us. But tell us more about, Vikram, the person, right? What motivates him and, what gets you going every day?
Yeah, look, Vikram, the person, is a singularly boring person. It's two of us, my wife and I, no kids. We made a conscious choice early on. I have a few hobbies, but mainly what I have found out is I like working. I like building. I have done my share of screw ups over the course of my life. So I think part of what I end up enjoying is helping people to ensure they don't make the same screw ups that I did over the course of building a business. I live in Los Altos Hills over in California. I also have a place over in Santa Barbara, so I spend my time between the two. But other than that, as I said, I'm a singularly boring person.
Okay, great. So there's lots we can learn from there too. So I see you've, built things, right? From in Savvy Technology, you've been in the startup world as well as sort of worked in more formal companies like Lockheed and then, I also see you have, 8x8. So tell us about, tell the audience, right? What is it that you learned and what would you advise, for people who want to get into startups, what works in, organized companies? What are your perspectives?
Yeah, no, actually, and this is the most important thing. No matter the size of the business, no matter the geography, no matter, pretty much anything, it comes down to the people. If you find good people, you will enjoy the process, and more likely than not, you will be successful. A good team can make a crappy business and get a reasonable return. A good team can take a great business or a good business and turn it into a massive business. But if you have the wrong team, right, one, it's stressful. Two, more likely than not, you're going to flame out. So I've always maintained it's people, 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 and then more people. So, literally from start. And so I think that's the number one lesson. The second thing is be absolutely honest with yourself in terms of what is the strength and weaknesses of a business. Too many times as founders, as CEOs, we live in what I call a reality distortion field. In order to be successful, you have to believe, right? But in the process of believing, you have to be careful that you don't BS yourself. And so, that absolute focus on reality to me is, essential. And then the third part that becomes equally essential. So in essence, people is obviously the first, the sense of realism and making sure that you're kind of, that you always ground yourself in reality is the second. And the third is having a plan for value creation that is not abstract. And by that, I mean, you have to basically make sure you understand what the company's value proposition is for your customers. It's too easy to talk about customers in the abstract. I mean, what is your customers are, you are talking to people who are strong leaders, and you're telling them, in order to get into the C-suite, here are the skill sets you need to learn. Your value proposition is very, very clear, right? Therefore, people gravitate to it. And so whenever people, if you had just used abstract words like, I will help you become a better person, okay? I will help you become a better leader, okay? That can be subheadings, but your point is, I will help you achieve your career goals by helping teach the types of skills necessary to transition from a competent, credible leader that is in middle management to a CX executive. So that to me is what is so critical in a successful business between an also ran business, is making sure you fully understand what value you're creating to the for the customer, and then step by step helping validate that. I think if you have those three things, I mean, to kind of summarize, people, a clear understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of your company, and three, really understand what value you're providing to your customers. I think if you do those three things, I'm not saying you're going to hit a home run and build a Facebook, but you will definitely go from A to B to C, and maybe you double your value or triple your value, but you will definitely create value.
Oh, great. Thanks so much. I didn't, need to summarize it at all because you did it so well at the end of what you're saying. So tell us in your early days, right? You were studying, and I can see degrees here, degrees there, right? So you're very academic, and then you get into a business. What made you, sort of take that leap into business?
An embarrassing story. So I was at Stanford. I was actually on a full scholarship at Stanford, working on the PhD program. I had finished all my courses. Stanford has something called the qualifying exam, where you, in order to get into the PhD program, you literally get to meet with 10 professors over the course of the day, and they can ask you any question. And then they rank you, and it's only people who have a master's degree get ranked. And then based on that, they admit the top 30 or 40 into the PhD program, something like that. So anyway, macro level is, so I'm sitting there, I'm arrogant, I'm feeling good. I'm at Stanford, one of the top universities. I'm obviously in the PhD program. I'm one of the top people. And over the summer, I took a statistics 116 course, which is an undergraduate statistics course. I mean, it seemed like a decent program. I had extra, time. I was just going to do a little bit of coursework. And so next to me was this young kid, I mean, really well built. He was actually Stanford has a football team, and he was their running back. So running back is the position in the football team that gets hit the most. He's the guy who grabs the ball, runs, and everybody tries to hit him. So, he was a Heisman Trophy candidate, which means he was considered one of the top, running backs in the entire country. Anyway, so I'm sitting next to him. So I'm sitting there going, you know what? I need to kind of help this kid. Midterms come, and I got smoked. I mean, I think I got like a 65 or 66. I'm literally in shock, going, this is an undergraduate course. I'm a Stanford, PhD candidate. This is easy. And so I turn over to this kid and I go, you know what? It's my duty to make sure this kid's confidence is not shaken, because he may quit Stanford and now we won't have a good football team. So I turn over, I say, how was the test? He goes, not bad. I go, seriously? And he goes, yeah. I said, how'd you do? He goes, I got a 97. So that's when I went, oh boy, maybe I am not cut out for academia. Maybe I need to go find something else. So that was my revelation, which is, look, I was a competent academic, so to speak. I wasn't a great one. It didn't come instinctively. Business came instinctively. And so that realization that said there are people in space that are better than me, no matter their outward look, and I need to find my calling. And so my calling was, I help build companies. I work with people. I was not meant to be a pure academic. So there were revelations there. By the way, he ended up playing, just to give you a perspective, he smoked me in my statistics class. He ended up playing pro football, as in he played in Canada, and I think he played also in the US.
Amazing. So you said it was really your calling, right, in terms of setting up, right? And then you had a choice, right, at that time. Why did you choose to get into building a company vis-a-vis joining an established one? Because I understand the Valley, and there's so much opportunity there, but what made you decide what you wanted to do?
People. I met a very interesting gentleman who's the founder of this business. I love the energy, and you're exactly right. I had a choice between an established company, Trimble Navigation of all things, which was building GPS, and this. And for some reason, the concept of working in a garage, pretty much, and the sense of 3-4 of us kind of tilting at windmills, the so-called Don Quixote thing. I'm 25 years old. It just appealed to me. And so sometimes I think better lucky than good. I'm very glad I did. And then watching a few people turn something into nothing. I mean, we literally got a contract from the US government called DARPA. You've heard of DARPA, which is the one that created the internet. They literally came to us. There's 5 of us. We're all starving. We don't know how to do business. And so they came to us and said, hey, we've got this technology that none of us can figure out what is a good application, called the internet. So we're coming up with a way to use RFID technology to use the internet to track cargo containers. What do you think? Can you guys do it? You're 5 people. And you go, of course we can. Right? How much money is there? So it literally, in a lot of ways, was luck. But it was also that sense of mission of a few people just tilting at windmills.
Okay, fantastic. And then you grew that company, right? And then at some stage, tell us about that journey as well, because that's a little new to a lot of corporate people, right? And today there's so much opportunity in India too.
Yeah, no, look, the company grew from 5 people to, as I indicated, no revenue to about 4 or 5 million in revenue. And then we ended up selling to Texas Instruments because Texas Instruments viewed it as a technology that they could put in a larger system and then really go after billion-dollar contracts. And so that's how we got acquired by Texas Instruments. It was the same concept for Lockheed. When we bought the company back, we cleaned it up. We also got into cargo security. 9/11 happened, and securing cargo containers became absolutely paramount. And so our technology, which was used to track cargo containers, could be easily repurposed to also track, secure those containers. And so that's how we started working with, the government of Singapore to track, and the government of Hong Kong to track cargo containers all over the world through the various ports. And so with that, we were able to fundamentally change the company, and Lockheed used it as an opportunity to basically build a global cargo security business. So those were all examples of, frankly, finding a niche, making sure you fully understood the customer, and making sure that you were solving a big enough problem that somebody else was willing to pay more for it. And then, as I indicated, at 8x8, 8x8 is phone systems. I mean, I still have a phone system. It's phone systems, it's video conferencing, it's basically contact centers, so customer service agents. So that again was finding that niche and making sure you built a big enough business and solved a big enough problem. So whether it's corporate America or whether it's small business, the only difference is the scale. So a small business, you are very close to the customer. Often in corporate America, there are layers between you and the customer. But one of the advice I've always had is if you want to be successful in the C-suite, you will find a way of always interacting in your company with the person that is closest to the customer, right? Because if you interact with the person closest to the customer, you will likely hear what the customer is saying, and that will guide your decision-making. And basically that, to me, is what is absolutely essential to grow a business.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I think a lot of words of wisdom there in terms of being close to the customer, getting a good team around, etc. Right? And you also worked at Lockheed Martin, which is like a really huge company, right? Tell us a bit about your experience there and how did it go?
Yeah, so I was a president at Lockheed. Initially, I ran a division, their global cargo security division. And then eventually I ended up as president of strategic ventures, where my goal or job was to commercialize Lockheed technologies that were initially created for defense, but find commercial applications. The scale of decision-making at Lockheed was very different, right? So let's just say at a small startup, you want to go meet with a customer, you get a mid-level executive. If you're Lockheed Martin and you want to meet with, let's just say, you want to do some kind of deal with the government of Singapore, guess what? The Prime Minister of Singapore shows up. And similarly, we did a deal at Lockheed with the government of UK, and the person who signed the deal was Prime Minister Cameron, right, at that time from UK. So the difference at Lockheed is just a true giant scale of decision-making. The resources were also extraordinary. So to me, the big difference between small startups and large corporations is just the scale of decision-making and the scale of access. But business remains the same, right? You still have to find a need. You will get up there, but you have always got to make sure you fully understand what value you're providing to the customer.
Fantastic, fantastic. So tell me, Lockheed is an ocean, right? So how and what does an Asian do there? Trying to make a mark in that organization, right?
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting look. It's an interesting way. It's actually in the category of trivia. When I left, I think we're talking about 2000-ish, 12. I think it was the highest ranking Asian American in the company. I don't like those I guess not stereotypes, but just those labels, and it's for a different reason. I know we've got a lot of folks from India, Asia, etc. I gave a talk a long time ago, which is the glass ceiling in your own head. Look, does a glass ceiling exist? Yes, right. If you acknowledge it, you are basically acknowledging that there is a ceiling. It's better to have that reality distortion feel that you make it all about yourself. And If you don't acknowledge it, my sense has been I never acknowledged it. And so, we are seeing an interesting trend in the US where you've seen a lot of, one of the categorizations years ago was Asians make good engineers, but we're not really cut out for the C-suite because we're not leaders and we're not decisive and all of the other things. Yeah, whatever, we heard that and you move on. But the reality is, in a lot of ways, you've seen a lot of companies now run by people of Indian origin. If you think about it, some of the biggest tech companies, IBM, Microsoft, Google, FedEx, Adobe, for a while, Twitter, they were all run of people with Indian origin. And the reason that I believe happened is we as as Indians have dealt with our share of bureaucracy, our share of, infrastructure being broken, dealing with diverse viewpoints, the cacophony of noise and all of the other stuff. I think in a lot of ways that has steeled us to figure out, to accept life as it is and try and navigate our way through it and just get stuff done, right? And we've seen this happen so many times, and it doesn't just apply to Indians. I've seen it with, some of the best CEOs I've met are women, and what they've learned to do is just figure out how, with all these diverse viewpoints and all this chest thumping that happens with people who have been in business for years, they've figured out how to kind of maneuver so that absolutely stuff gets done. And the difference between a good CEO and a bad CEO is not their ability to talk, but their ability to get stuff done, given the circumstances and the reality of their situation. So I think you are seeing a lot of non-traditional people become CEOs these days because there is an acknowledgement that if you know how to get stuff done, it doesn't matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is, it doesn't matter what your race is. You just know how to look at the reality, you know how to look at the diversity of viewpoints, you know how to look at the noise, you know how to look at a less than ideal situation and make it better. So getting stuff done to me is the number one determinant. And as long as you have that in your head, I think the glass ceiling evaporates. And maybe it still exists, but in the end, if you don't acknowledge it, I think you will reach higher and go further.
Great. I think that's a great perspective for a lot of us here, seeing this big change, right? So even Ajay Banga today is, going places, etc. All people from here. So tell us, let's say CEOs of smaller companies, let's say startup companies, etc., and CEOs of larger companies, right? Now, you've seen both sides. What do you think? So one thing you said is getting stuff done. What else do you think is required of a CEO to really get?
It's about what the company is trying to do. There is companies where you are in a certain state and you want to operationally get better. Those are a certain type of CEO, right? Hard charging, hard driving, but basically what they're trying to do is optimize what they have. They're taking what exists and they're making it significantly better. That's one type of CEO. Then there are other types of CEO when companies need to fundamentally change. Those are the kind who break glass, blow stuff up, and remake it. So to me, that is the bigger distinction, is are you a CEO who's taking an ongoing concern and significantly making it better? Or are you trying to totally reinvent your company, right? And kind of turn it on its head. And you will see the persona differences there. And so I've just never been the type of person who knows how to blow stuff up and make it better. So I'm not a true founder. The true founders are true visionaries who can come in, look at a company and go, I'm going to blow everything up. I don't care. I believe I'm the smartest guy in the room and I can get to the other side. That's one type of CEO and I admire them. My style has always been, I can take what exists and I can make it better, right? I won't fundamentally change it, but I will dramatically make it better. So, 2x, 3x, whatever the current valuation. So that's why I make that distinction that it's not the size of the company, it's the mission. If you're trying to blow a company up and really remake it because your business is being fundamentally affected and you need to go from building mechanical cash registers to a digital cash registers, you need to disrupt your one type of CEO and one type of persona. And if your goal is to be the market leader, but you already have a good business and you're just trying to be a market leader, that's a very different type of CEO.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's a great new definition in terms of really segmenting CEOs. It's something we can all learn from. But tell me, on your way up to that level, right? I know whether it's Savi or whether you've also been through that where you've gone up through the ranks. What do you think has helped you succeed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it's the same thing. No acknowledgement of any perceived shortcoming, or so I just kind of block out biases. I block out any potential obstacles. The second thing is partnering partnering with your team. There is nobody that succeeds that doesn't, to quote the Ringo Starr song, nobody gets, you always get by with a little help from your friends. So there's a great saying that I learned, which is be good to the people you're with, as you're on your way up, because you'll see the same people on your way down. So there's nothing gained, but every person that I have interacted with has had something to teach. Right? Some that I wanted to learn, some I didn't want to learn, but everybody had a perspective. So recognizing and respecting that there may be difference in viewpoint, but basically leveraging what you can learn from everybody around you is absolutely key. And then the third thing, going back to your comment on the way up, so to speak, is always recognizing what is the mission of the company and how is the company providing value to its customers. Because the people who succeed are the ones that can help make the company better at servicing their customers. And the people who don't succeed are the ones that are just purely focused internally and are trying to just think about how to maneuver their way up. If you help solve a problem for your customers and have an innate understanding of how to make solving that problem better, more efficient, and provide more value to the customer, invariably, people who are above you will recognize that talent and basically help you on your journey. And so that's, to me, to kind of summarize, one, you cannot spend too much time thinking about all the obstacles, because if you do, you won't ever get, out of your bed in the morning. I mean, what's the statement? I think there's an Asian statement or a old Chinese statement: a journey of 1,000 miles always begins with a few steps. You got to take that first step and keep taking a step without looking at the journey, so to speak, and or the obstacles that you will have in the way. Number two is always learn from everybody around you, irrespective of rank, station, whatever, and always be kind. And that doesn't mean you have to be submissive, but it means kind is you have to be firm, you have to be driven, but there's absolutely no value in being a jerk, right? And then the third part is always keeping a laser focus in what is your company's mission in terms of helping their customers, and making sure you understand that intimately in every fiber of your being, because that'll help you make the company better, in which case you will benefit from it.
Absolutely. Summarized so well. So there's that relentless focus, right? Which you don't give up on people, and create value, right, at points. And I think you made a great point there by saying, you can keep solving customer problems and therefore get noticed for doing that. Probably building your business, adding something, rather than playing the internal game of, because you don't really survive for too long, right, because there's no value there. Great. And, let's say at a larger place, right, like Lockheed Martin, what did you see there in terms of people who, like you said, right, people who work 10, 20 years, and then, the ones who actually made it to the C-suite? What did you see in a large company like that?
Actually, very similar. Again, relentless. Every person that moved up through the ranks. Probably the greatest CEO I ever had the pleasure of interacting with is a gentleman by the name of Bob Stevens. Bob was the CEO of Lockheed Martin for years, and I worked very closely with him. The thing that got Bob the C-suite is Lockheed merged with a company called Martin Marietta. So the two companies kind of merged together years ago. And I'm talking about early 2000s, I think. And so late 90s. So anyway, long story short, they were going through, Martin Marietta culture was a very financially driven culture. Lockheed culture was a very swashbuckling culture. You think back, Skunk Works, SR-71, space, all of that kind of stuff. And Lockheed would basically take risks and launch rockets, and every once in a while rockets would blow up. And, there was not a financially, fiscally driven mentality. And so the company was really struggling with, cash flow and flirting with bankruptcy and government bailouts and all of the other stuff. And Bob was very ruthless in recognizing his customer was the government. They were not going to bail him out. What they wanted was predictability. What they wanted was a level of consistency. And he went through the process at multiple levels of starting to remake the company on a much more fiscally sound basis, where they basically took calculated risks as opposed to a little bit of the cowboy type, Hail Mary, go for it type risk. And he was recognized for it. And over the years, he became CEO, probably one of the most successful CEOs in Lockheed Martin history. And so again, the main point is always recognizing that realism of where the company is and what is the customer really looking for, and constantly bridging that gap. And this is a very, very, very large company. So when you think about it, even at GE, what's going on? If you think about it, GE had lost its way. It was taking on very esoteric projects like digital transformation and all kinds of other stuff, right? And then you had the new CEO come on board from Danaher, and he literally said, no, what GE needs to be is we've become too complicated. We need to simplify. We're going to take portions of GE, we're going to spin it out. We're not going to be a financial company. We are an industrial company. And he focused the company on solving clear customer problems, right? We got to make better jet engines. We got to make better this. And through that, you are seeing GE's revival. So again, the people who make it to the top are the ones who very clearly recognize the strengths and limitations of the company that they're in and what the customer is really looking for, and relentlessly focus on that. And as part of that, they then grow through and are given more and more of an opportunity to be at the top. I mean, it happens, as I said, in every business. Microsoft is another company. To some extent, they had lost their way a little bit. They were, dabbling. They were trying to buy, phone system or phones because they were trying to compete with Apple. They were in basically desktop. They had gotten into cloud, but not in a big way. And then you bring in somebody like Nadella, and like a laser, he just focused the company. He says, okay, number one, we're going to be a cloud company. We're cloud first. Everything else will subsume, and over time, everything is going to evolve in that direction. And then he made the bet on Chat GPT and said, all right, we're now going to go into AI. But if you think about it, that fundamental change is Nadella recognizing his customers were going to the cloud and Microsoft wasn't keeping up. And so he fundamentally shifted Microsoft's focus to cloud and was recognized for it, and then moved up the ranks.
Amazing. I think that's such a great view of things that happen at the top, which I'm sure the audience is sort of really benefiting it because they don't get that aerial view, that you're at. But let's just come back to a bit on, a couple of steps down, right? So there are a lot of people in India today who are great. I mean, they're engineers. They've gotten into the software business because, the software business is what is today probably one of the largest employers in India. And let's say, for example, the US is a big market for them. Right? So you have a lot of big companies. What do you see, in terms of the software industry, and you've probably seen that? What trends do you see, and what is it that people can benefit from?
Yeah, look, two big trends, and none of them is a surprise. Cloud, and more cloud. Cloud, by another name, is basically centralized computing, right? When you think about it, we went from mainframes all the way to a network computer, and now we're back to essentially a mainframe concept, right? Because what is a cloud? It's like, but people forget what the cloud is, and this is where the right engineers getting it. Cloud is not just, hey, we'll put everything in one centralized location. It is a uniformity of the way you deliver service and the way you price service and the way you support service for your customers. Because what is truly cloud? Cloud is build once, sell many. Update once, update all. Price once, price all. So if you really think about it, that infrastructure saving, it's the amortizing of expenses, resources over a whole series of customers. right? So if you think about it, there's not a custom product for you and a custom product for you and a custom product. It's one product, all basically delivered. And so to me, those people who intrinsically get the cloud, that's a great skill set to have. But you have to understand, you cannot have 7 clouds delivering to 7 different customers and call it cloud. You will be able to get away with it from a marketing point of view. But the true value of cloud is when I upgrade my software one time, I'm upgrading it for everybody. When I price my software one time, I'm pricing it for everybody, right? So to some extent, that huge focus, because that becomes a very high gross margin business, right? Because in essence, what you're doing is you're taking the cost of your software development and your software support and your sales and marketing, and you're spreading it over an entire customer base as opposed to making it bespoke for each customer. So that's one key trend. The second is look, large language models are here to stay. I'm not saying that ChatGPT or Bard or any of these other things is anywhere good, but what I am telling you is that is the future. And frankly, that is the great equalizer, because those people who start to figure it out, the rote programming work will go away, and it'll be the higher order programming work where you're really trying to solve a customer's problem. So, right. So when just let's use travel agents, right? And this is not software, but I'm just using this as an analogy. You want to book a trip from here to there and have 5 cities in the way, just enter it into BART. And it'll spit out an entire itinerary with a level of hotels. So think of it as foundational coding has now been done. So now you have that higher order things of, okay, which city do I like better? What do I look for in a hotel? And you're able to then take what is already given and optimize it. So I think you're going to see programming, and particularly for folks that are mid-level, the way they will move up is the rote programming. They will start to learn enough about the trends in AI and leverage that to do the mainstream rote programming. But the voice of the customer, they will add that extra 10 or 20% that will differentiate them. Those people who will figure it out will create the next set of billionaires out of India.
That's amazing. I think this is insight that's really priceless. And in terms of a lot of them listening here, I guess, I think now where you need to go, how you need to shape your career going ahead, right? So there are a couple of constant trends that I've heard from you, think about the customer, etc. And that's what I want to really say, because most engineers, right? And especially I'm just saying that it's not fair to brand everybody, but they get into more the technology piece, right? That's the way you're wired, right? In terms of getting the best and optimal technologies. So you brought in 2 things. One is, you talked about understanding the cloud, and you talked about really this whole new growth in AI, ML, and really doing the higher order work, right? How does, let's say, somebody who's aspiring to be a CTO, or somebody who's aspiring to be a CIO, or somebody who's aspiring, to be any of these roles, right? What do they need to do to make impact in the future?
Yeah, so the next logical thing, if you're an engineer, is get closer to product management. The reason I use product management, I consider product management the halfway house between engineering and sales and marketing, right? What is product management? I mean, to me, frankly, at Microsoft and other companies, the most powerful role is product management. And the people who do product management came either from an engineering background or from a marketing background and got technical. Because what is product management? Product management is looking at your product, looking at your customer, and then finding that Venn diagram of overlap, and then figuring out what are the things you can develop that can get the maximum value for the customer, right? And that your engineering team can build it without throwing stuff at you because it's reasonable. So to me, my evolution for engineers is the more you learn about product management, and product management really comes down to what features in engineering have the most bang for the buck for your customers. So you'll keep hearing that same common theme. If you want to be an engineer that wants to stay in engineering, learning engineering and being a damn good coder and all of the other things, no doubt, you have to do all of that. Being able to work collaboratively in a team, absolutely critical. But if you really want to move ahead, you have to understand how your product is being used by the customer and what are the feature functions that have the most value and which ones don't have enough value. And those little things will make a huge difference in your life. I can give you a simple analogy. I was seeing that when I built the original RFID tags, they were not getting the quick adoption that I wanted. And what was the problem was, it was hard for people to mount it on a cargo container. It required ties and all kinds of other things. So here's a sophisticated RFID tag to track cargo containers that has tremendous value, but was failing initially because the way that it was mounted and attached to a cargo container was not easy, and soldiers were not basically following through. So we came up with different things, including a magnetic mount where you could literally throw a tag against a container and it would stick. And adoption went through the roof. So it's the little things that make the difference between a good product and an awesome product. And as an engineer, the more you learn how your customer's using your product, the more likely you are to add that feature. And the more you evolve in learning to, what the customer needs, the more you position yourself as more power. If you really think about it, people use that phrase somewhat in a derogatory way, but they always say, follow the money, right? Who has the money when you're a company? The person who has the money in a company is your customer, right? Because if they don't pay you, you have no company. So guess what? If you follow the money and get to the customer and figure out what is the thing that they are willing to spend money for, your power and influence in your own company will grow, and it'll evolve you to, break the bounds of just being a pure engineer into getting into management and into the CXO suite.
Oh, fantastic. So, I think fundamentally it all comes back to the customer, right? You've got to find a way, because companies make money when, customers are happy. And therefore, whether you're an engineer or whether you're a backroom person or whatever, right? You're a coder, just find ways to make sure whatever your customer is, find a way to make an impact in your company so that you can, really have impact, right? Because tell me now, just one other thing, right? At large places, so there are so many roles and so many people, right? What do you, like when you've been a CEO, what do you look for, in people around the business and, pick them up for senior roles?
So look, to me, the number one thing, I look for integrity. I've always maintained that I don't care where somebody comes from. I don't care about their social economic background. I don't care about their religion. I don't care about caste, creed, gender, anything. I care what's in somebody's head and what's in somebody's heart. So to me, that translates into, I look for integrity, I look for smarts, I look for work ethic, and I look for curiosity, right? And so the reason I kind of use that in that area, integrity, there is no substitute for integrity. If you can't trust somebody, if you don't believe that they're always going to do the right thing, it's not worth it. You do look for smart people because we're in a business where you have to be smart, right? You have to learn that, smarts is what kind of enables continuous learning. Curiosity, which says, hey, this is the way we've been doing stuff forever. But in order for us to evolve and change, these are the things I need to learn more about so I can help the company evolve and change. And then, as I indicated, work ethic, there's no substitute for hard work. I think, and the curiosity and hard work to me then lead towards what I told you about, which is understanding your customer. Because if you go curiosity, it's like, hey, this is what I've always been selling, but why are my customers buying it? And what if I added A, B, C, D, E would cause them to buy more? And what if I detracted would cause them to buy less? To me, that's huge because it says that somebody who's continuously focused on improvement, right? And then the work ethic to do the work. You can't just phone it in. You have to go talk to your customers. You have to kind of, the phrase that we use in the US is you have to kiss 1,000 frogs, right? Until you find that one with prince or princess, depending on your gender. But the main point is you have to kiss that 1,000 frogs, which is a lot of painful work. And then suddenly you get that nugget, and that nugget is worth everything. So those are the 4 criteria I look for in people.
Fantastic. I think there's a lot of learning there. I think there's no excuse from the work ethic part, right? In terms of, but here's something else that I see that in a lot of engineers, right? So they're very good at let's say, for example, doing the technical work, right? But they're unable to sort of very often speak very well and articulate themselves, right? So what is it that in terms of executive presence, in terms of being able to speak and make yourself heard, what is it that you advise people?
Yeah, that I would tell you that's an interesting point. It came more natural to me. I think you and I remember. Actually no. I think I did it after I left La Martiniere. I went to DPS. I got into debating of all things, which was actually very helpful to me. Yeah, the ability to communicate is absolutely critical because you have to be able to convey your ideas in a manner that people understand. I think the best way to do that is either get a mentor who's a good communicator. Sheryl Sandberg, I attended a talk with Sheryl Sandberg and her former head of HR, Kim. I can't remember Kim's name, but she used the example of when Kim was at Google and Sheryl was her boss. Kim was having trouble being heard because she would use a lot of ums, uhs, and all of the other stuff. And Sheryl gave her brutal advice, right? I think they've now coined a term for it called radical candor, right? Which is a HR philosophy. And Kim, I think I can't remember Kim's last name, but I have a book somewhere. But Kim, I think, translated that and talked about it. But Sheryl was brutal with her and said, look, every time you do the whatever, it makes you sound dumb in front of Sergey and Larry. And you're never going to move up because Google values smarts over everything else. And so this is where in communication, if you feel like you're not good, either find a mentor who actually will be brutally honest about how effective your communication, or get somebody like you, Mudit, where it's all about learning how to communicate succinctly, clearly. And then, the only 3 phrases I have got on communication, I learned from a retired, or actually not that time, but a 3-star general in the US military. I was presenting to him. I was a young 26 years old, completely intimidated. He goes, Vic, let me tell you the 3 rules of communication, right? I said, what are they? He goes, if you learn this, you will always be able to communicate. I said, what are they? And he was a Southern general, and he said it in a very, Southern accent. He goes, be brief, be bright, be gone. So it's like, okay, I got it, sir. So I was brief, bright, and I was gone.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I'm so happy you brought that out, because one of the things I teach in the program is an executive communication toolkit, right? Because you only get a few minutes, right, with the C-suite.
Yeah.
You better make it or be gone.
Yeah, exactly. Be brief, be bright, be gone.
Good. I think that's a great one that I'm going to remember. Yeah. So let's just take a few questions that are coming up, right? So
Sure.
For me, one of the questions here is, for a CXO, how significant would be business analytics? That is applying AI, data science, and identifying new opportunities for growth and business.
Look, analytics by its very definition is important, right? And so it depends on how you're defining business analytics. If you're looking at how you can use AI and business analytics to help find new areas of growth, I think that's interesting. But if you're saying that you want to really use AI, ML to create the next generation of analytics that can give you insight into the workings of your existing company and help identify areas of weakness, that is huge. To me, we are heading towards the age of efficiency. I think you're going to find that people are more and more going to use KPIs, key performance indicators, analytics, et cetera, to squeeze cost out of a company. If you think about it, in this high interest rate environment, profit becomes that much more critical, but you have to still do the mission of the company. So analytics to do efficiency, I believe, is going to be critical. Analytics to find new businesses, I'm not yet a fan of, because I believe you cannot substitute for actually talking to customers, trying to understand a need, and the human creativity, I think, is critical. But I think analytics to drive efficiency is going to be absolutely huge.
Okay, I think that's a fair point, because a lot of people, right? Some of the greatest creators like Steve Jobs, etc., didn't even believe in in that kind of thing unless you, got it and heard it, right? So great. I think that's a great answer. And another one that is how do CXOs, leverage design thinking in MSSP stroke MSP domain? So that's more your, what are your thoughts on that?
So ask the question again. I'm struggling to articulate it.
Actually, what I'm going to request is Mayank, why don't you unmute yourself and explain that? You'll probably do a better job than I do. Yeah.
Sure. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes.
Yeah, you are.
Sure. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I work for ConnectWise, again, one of the Thoma Bravo companies.
Okay.
Domain. So that's why the question was here. When I look at a lot of, our cybersecurity products, so I drive the cybersecurity vertical engineering business primarily for the India region. So when I look at a lot of these products, a lot of these products are less user innovation driven. So that's why I came up with this question, because when I look at my competitors or other competitors from different companies, the products are still primarily 5 years, 6 years old compared to if I look at the e-commerce business, or if I look at any other Apple products, the kind of user research or the kind of user experience that these products drive, MSSP is a bit lacking in this domain. So what are your thoughts?
Actually, I'm on the board of 3 cybersecurity companies: TokenX, Secure Auth, actually 2 cybersecurity companies, and then the third one I was on was Ping Identity. So go back to the mission. What is the most important thing for cybersecurity, and who is using it? Cybersecurity is primarily being used by the IT department to basically create an environment which is safe for users, right? So you are absolutely right. The user interface is 5 years behind, but that's because your products, my products for those, are being targeted at nerds. And so the view is nerds can handle a crappy user interface. It's not necessarily being targeted at consumers, but that is changing. So if you think about it, there's a new trend. One of the companies I'm with, Secure Auth, Arculix, we're heading towards passwordless, where all the background is done, where you go figure out, nobody needs to enter a password, nobody needs to do multiple authentication, but using geolocation, using your patterns, using AI/ML, we can tell whether it's you or somebody else, right? So I think you will start to see Palo Alto Networks and others putting a lot of emphasis on user interface when the consumer starts to have much more control. But so far, cybersecurity, the control has been with the IT department, and everybody inherently believes that the IT department can handle bits and bytes and doesn't need a nice user interface.
Sure, agree. Thank you. That really helps.
Great. So we have another question from Samrat, who's takes a global position out of India for Barclays, and he says, "What do you look for to make a business efficient operationally?"
That's an interesting one. Again, it's a very broad question. What you start with is, frankly, again, voice of the customer. What product are you delivering, and what value proposition are you providing to the customer? Is it a commodity product, or is it differentiated? Do you have pricing power, or do you not have pricing power? So I always start with, can you price this product in a way that gives you adequate gross margin, or are you in a commodity-driven market where it's a volume game? So to me, it always starts with that. Once you figure that part out, all the rest of it flows from it, right? So in essence, then you go, okay, I have a differentiated product. These are the 5 or 10 features that matter. You know what? Those are the 5 or 10 features I'm going to invest in. Everything I'm going to go to ruthlessly cut. I always like to ruthlessly cut G&A, because those are, pure management folks, and they are just overhead. The areas I always invest in, to me, in a company, that 3 areas you invest in. Number 1 is engineering. So you have a product, engineering, product management, I'm kind of combining together. Number 2 is sales, because guess what? Nothing happens until you sell something. And number 3 to me is customer success, right? Because what you want is, once you get a customer, you want to keep a customer, you want to make them happy. I think Valerie and Bonnie are here from Genesis Digital, and they make it a real, point of being out and touching customers, because in the end, there are three metrics people look at. They look at bookings, right? They look at net retention rate, which is what percentage of your customers minus upsell are you able to keep at the end of the year, right? Which says your customers are staying. And then the third one is EBITDA, right? So those are the three metrics that SaaS companies look at all the time, right? New bookings, which is, are you growing, right? Net retention, are you keeping your customers and being able to upsell them more products so they're becoming more loyal? And number three is, what's your EBITDA? And rule of thumb I've always used, and Morgan Stanley I think came up with this, they call it a rule of 40. For a high performing SaaS company, a rule of 40 is growth rate as a percentage, right? Plus EBITDA as a percentage must be greater than 40, right? So if you're growing the company 20% and your EBITDA margin is 20%, that's rule of 40. If you're growing at 10%, then your EBITDA margin should be 30%, right? That's the method most PEs are using to value companies these days. PE stands for private equity, by the way.
Okay, great. And, we're at the top of the hour. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay, great. So Raju here, I think you answered a bit of it, but he'd like to ask this again. What are the three things top management looks up for, pulling up talent?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about it. Integrity, no question, right? Smarts, curiosity, and work ethic. And as I said, around curiosity and work ethic, work ethic, focused on understanding the current situation in the company and how it can serve its customers better is how it's manifested. But those are the four criteria I look for.
Fantastic. I think you said the same thing twice, so it's absolutely ingrained. There's no way. Exactly how you said it. So thank you so much, Vikram. It's been such a pleasure. And I think I can't thank you enough for, waking you up so early in the morning. It's 6:30 Pacific time when we started. And thank you everybody around the world for making this time today. And I'm sure we've all learned a lot. And thank you very much. So have a great day, Vikram, and we'll be in touch.
You got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.